During the 20th century, the Chinese nationalist revolutionary Dr. Sun Yat-sen once said that there is a traditional value in China based on the ancient Chinese philosophers of Yao, Shun, Yu, Tang, Wen, Wu, Zhou and Confucius, one after another. Sun Yat-sen said that these ancient Chinese philosophies forms the foundation of his ideology, and that his goal is to inherit this to demonstrate it to the entire world. 中国有一个正统思想，这是尧舜禹唐文武周公孔子. Right? That was what Sun Yat-sen said a couple years before he died. From this statement alone, we can clearly understand that Dr. Sun Yat-sen had a very deep love and reverence for the Chinese history, the Chinese wisdom and philosophy of the past, and for the traditional Chinese morality, ethics, and virtues. Many Chinese people oftentimes find a great joy in pointing out that the Chinese history and the Chinese culture are the oldest and most continuous in the entire world. And I think this is really something remarkable and something which does deserve a lot of admiration. But I think this is even more meaningful considering that the foundation of the Chinese culture centers on certain virtues such as righteousness, benevolence, family values, humility, and loyalty. It is because of the virtue of the Chinese civilization, which emphasizes the pursuit of righteousness, benevolence, family values, humility, and loyalty, which enabled the Chinese culture to perpetuate itself and transmit itself across generations over the last 4,000 to 5,000 years. Despite the rise and fall of dynasties and different political regimes, the various peoples of Asia have assimilated into the Han Chinese culture because they found the Han Chinese culture to have been so remarkable in its virtue. They became Chinese, and they contributed to the formation of the modern Chinese nation, which has existed to this day. Dr. Sun Yat-sen's goal and the mission of the early Kuomintang Party was to find some way to inherit these traditional Chinese values, articulated in a way where modern people can understand and transplant into the modern world, which China suddenly found itself thrusted into after the events of the 19th and 20th century. That is the beauty of Sun Yat-sen's 3 principles of the people, 三民主义, which were a series of speeches and writings in an attempt to articulate a vision on how to build China in the modern world. So this is why I would always say that the 3 principles of the people, 三民主义, will never become obsolete, and that this thinking of Dr. Sun Yat-sen deserves great attention and great importance. Now, who were the Yao, Shun, Yu, and Tang referenced by Sun Yat-sen? Yao, Shun, Yu, and Tang were the ancient rulers of China when China first came into existence as a political entity. Yao, Shun, Yu, and Tang were emperors who were very revered for their demonstration of morality, ethics, virtue, self-sacrifice, and exemplary family values. Yao ruled China during the 30th century BC. Wow, that's a very long time ago. The 30th century BC. He was known for his humility. He ruled China for 70 years. Towards the end of his administration, instead of giving up power to his son, who was known to be very incompetent, he decided to find talent and virtue among the common folks. He looked for an heir among the commoners. Eventually, he found a man named Shun, who was known for his profound family piety. Shun had a disabled father. He had a mother who was very cruel, and he also had a brother who was abusive. Despite coming from this terrible family background, Shun did not abandon his family members, but instead sustained them by starting a business of engaging in commerce, making pottery, and farming. The Chinese idiom of family values moves the heaven is from the story of Shun. So Shun was appointed to be the next emperor. As emperor, he maintained the peace and stability, and just like Yao, he decided not to pass his throne on to another family member, but instead looked for another person of virtue to pass power to. Eventually, he found a man of virtue named Yu. Yu was the emperor who famously dedicated 12 years of his life away from home to travel across China to manage the flood waters, which were threatening the country at the time. The flood waters eventually were controlled, and the Central Plains were left extremely fertile, resulting in an agricultural civilization developing, and eventually a powerful civilization developed, which would later become the modern Chinese civilization. Many years later, during the 20th century BC, there was an Emperor Tang who established the Shang dynasty. Now, Emperor Tang was a very God-fearing man. He was a penitent man. He had a great devotion to the masses, very selfless, but he also had a great faith in God. See, at the start of his reign, there was a 5-year famine and drought in China. This famine occurred coincidentally at around the same time of Joseph's famine in Egypt. If you read the Bible in the book of Genesis, remember there was a big famine which lasted 7 years in Egypt, and I believe Joseph, he was told by God to store up grain and store a bunch of food. But the point is, in the book of Genesis, it was recorded that this drought covered the face of the earth. Well, apparently during the Shang dynasty of China, which existed at around the same time that ancient Egypt existed, there was also a really big famine which lasted 5 years. Well, because this famine had no end in sight, Emperor Tang went into the wilderness. He prayed to God, and he repented of his sins. He offered himself as a sacrifice to God to end the suffering of the masses. I am praying for rain for the sake of my subjects. If we have to sacrifice a man to heaven, I will volunteer myself to be the sacrifice. The fault is mine and mine alone. Do not punish my subjects. If my subjects have done anything wrong, which may have contributed to this famine, I must be the cause for the wrongdoings. Heaven, please do not hurt my subjects because I failed to guide them properly. So he prepared to set himself on fire as a sacrifice to heaven, as a selfless act of repentance. But right before he lit himself on fire, rain began to fall, ending the drought in China. So all of these historic references and narratives of Yao, Shen, Yu, and Tang were later codified by Confucius and his students like Mencius to clearly articulate and clearly define a well-written ethical framework based on righteousness, benevolence, family, values, humility, and loyalty. Confucius, Mencius, and subsequent Chinese thinkers emphasized that it is the responsibility of the Chinese people to engage in self-improvement, self-strengthening, 自强, to pursue these virtues in order to live out exemplary lives as the 君子, or the Chinese gentleman. Confucians argue that if the society is made up of 君子, then we can enter into a society where widows, the disabled, the poor, the lonely, and the sick are all taken care of, where everyone can have, where goods are no longer wasted, and strength is not misused. Therefore, crime disappears, and doors can remain open at night, and this type of society is called the 大同, the Great Unity Society. In the national flag anthem of the Republic of China, it says that we are to pursue the 大同. Sun Yat-sen, in his speeches, have referenced the pursuit of 大同 as his ideology. And even Mao Zedong in the 1950s, before the Cultural Revolution, before he went apeshit with the Cultural Revolution, also once made references to trying to establish the 大同 society. This is the intellectual and spiritual foundation of the Chinese civilization. And I also would personally argue that this Chinese wisdom represents the formalization of the natural law from God, written into our human conscience, accessible through reason. The ancient Chinese sages, Yao, Shen, Yu, Tang, they interpreted the natural law from God within the cultural context of China. Thus, it can be said that the Chinese culture is a gift from God, and Chinese people who have inherited the Chinese culture have a special duty to become the best version of themselves, to self-improve, self-strengthen, to represent the Chinese identity correctly to the entire world, to demonstrate its brilliance to the entire world. Confucius once said that a gentleman harbors the intention to do good for 10,000 generations, but begins by practicing himself. So accordingly, we have to self-improve ourselves. We have to live with self-discipline, reject hedonism, reject corruption, vice, greed, Satanism, destructive influences. Second, we have to have the self-confidence. What is the self-confidence? This is something which I think a lot of Chinese people actually are lacking these days. Maybe because of the last 100 years with China being poor or being bullied by foreign countries or whatever. Self-confidence means having faith in ourselves, in the Chinese culture, in the Chinese wisdom. It also means to have the cultural self-confidence. This is very important. The cultural self-confidence. I have faith in the Chinese culture. And third, of course, I want to emphasize again, as Chinese people, we have to be the best version of ourselves individually, based on our personal circumstances, through physical fitness, through martial art, academics, spiritually, intellectually. We have to represent ourselves, our family name, and our Chinese heritage to the entire world. The Christians always tell me, we have to be the light of the world. Well, I say to Chinese people, we have to be the light of the world. We Chinese people, we have to be the light of the world. Let me tell you, in a couple months, I'm going to release a book where I'm going to tell you, I'm going to codify everything which I've learned over the last couple of years into this work, and you can access it. Pay me $2 on Patreon. You get a piece of literature. Just $2 on Patreon. If you contribute to me on Patreon, not only do you get access to a Telegram chat group, which a lot of my subscribers are already in, but you also get literature written by yours truly, me, Captain Cool 7.